Philadelphia Here I Come is a play written by Brian Friel. Gar O'Donnell lives with his father in the 1960s in Donegal. Gar is preparing to emigrate to Philadelphia. Gar, who lives with his father, SB, in Donegal, is preparing to emigrate to Philadelphia to live with his aunt, Lizzie Sweeney. The play takes place over the evening before his departure. There are two characters playing two Gars, Gar Public and his alter ego, Gar Private, who is only seen by the audience. Gar Private speaks the internal thoughts of Gar Public. Together, they present two views of the one man. At the beginning of the play, Gar seems delighted to be leaving for Philadelphia. He cheerfully discusses it with the housekeeper Madge, who has been Gar's mother figure since his mother died after his birth. Through the conversation with Madge, Gar Private and SB himself, it becomes clear that Gar and his father have a strained relationship and neither has broached the topic of his departure. A flashback lets us know that Gar has recently lost his love, Kate Dungan, to another man. This seems to have prompted his decision to go to Philadelphia. The visitors call by throughout the evening: Gar's friends, the boys, Kate Dunnigan, the canon of the parish, and Master Boyle, a local teacher. Through these visits, we build up a picture of Ballybeg as lacking opportunity and spontaneity for the residents. In episode 2, the action flashes back to a visit from Gar's aunt Lizzie and her husband Con. They are visiting the O'Donnells' residency on a return trip from Philadelphia. We see Gar agreeing to go to live there. It becomes clear as the play progresses that Gar is not entirely sure about leaving, also that SB is more worried than he lets on to those around him, including Gar. The play closes with Private asking Public, and in quotes, "God, boy, why do you have to leave? Why? And Gar replying, in quotes, "I don't know, I don't know." The ending is ambiguous, and we are left unsure whether Gar goes or not. The opening stage directions informs us there are two Gars who present two views of the one man. Gar Private is the alter ego who speaks the thoughts, opinions and dreams of Gar Public. Gar Private is invisible to the other characters and only heard by Gar Public and the audience. Gar Public, however, never sees or looks at Gar Private. As Friel writes in the stage directions, one cannot look at one's alter ego. The cheerful banter between Gar and the housekeeper Madge, the first two characters on the stage, show that Gar is very close to Madge, but there are hints right from the beginning that he does not enjoy such a close relationship with his father, who is also his boss in the family-run dry goods store. At the beginning of the play, Gar seems delighted to be leaving for Philadelphia. In this episode, we see the first flashback scene. Gar thinks about the encounter with his now lost love, darling Kate Dugan, and her father, Senator Dugan. Kate and Gar discuss how they will get married, but the scene ends with Gar losing his nerve and leaving before asking the senator's permission for Kate's hand in marriage. It is clear to Gar that Senator Dugan did not think he was good enough for Kate. Key scene: Master Boyle, a teacher from the local school, visits to say goodbye. Boyle is portrayed as a self-involved alcoholic, but he comes across as a sympathetic man. Like Gar, he has only failure and disappointment in his life and in Ballybeg. Episode 1 concludes with Gar experiencing a rush of sentimentality as Boyle leaves and Madge re-enters the room. Like many of the characters we have met so far, Gar tries to repress his real feelings and finds truthful communication difficult. Episode 2 opens a short time afterwards with Gar still in his bedroom. He checks the documents he needs for his journey. Flashback to Aunt Lizzie. The action flashes back again to the visit from Gar Gar's Aunt Lizzie and her husband Con. Overwhelmed by a variety of emotional forces, Gar agrees to go to live with them in Philadelphia. However, when we are brought back to the present, Private admits that he doesn't really want to go. Gar leaves the house and SB enters from the shop to read his newspaper. Madge loses patience with SB about his inflexible nightly routine and how busy she is. But we can see that her frustration really stems from SB's inability or unwillingness to acknowledge that his son is emigrating. When Madge finishes her rant and leaves the room, we notice that SB has been reading his newspaper upside down, a sign he may be thinking more about Gar leaving than he is letting on. Gar returns with his friends, the boys, whom he has met, coming to say goodbye to him. There is much loud talk about the number of girls they attract, but it is obvious from Private's commentary that the boys lie and exaggerate. Although the only show of real friendship is when Ned presents his belt to Gar as a leaving present, the scene does not close on a nostalgic note. Or the scene does close on a nostalgic note. When the boys leave, Private begins a frustrated tirade about his friends. But his monologue ends poignantly, reflecting that the memories he has left with will be precious, precious gold. The scene is followed by a visit from Kate. She too has come to say goodbye. Gar's resentful attitude causes her to leave awkwardly, and Gar buries his face in his hands. Private's disjointed monologue builds up to Public's final words in this episode in a whisper, inverted commas, whispered shout. He cries, "Screwballs, say something, father." This outburst suggests that Gar is desperate for his father to acknowledge his departure. Episode 3 opens a short time later with Gar, SB and Madge saying the rosary. When they have finished praying, Gar Public asks SB if he still has a memory of Gar's childhood, but the Canon, Ballybeg's parish priest, turns up before SB can be questioned any further. The Canon and SB play drafts in exactly the same way they do every night, with few new topics of conversation. Gar takes this opportunity to quiz Madge about his mother. Madge reveals little and suggests Gar ask his father. Part 1 of episode 3 ends with SB and the Canon playing their uneventful drafts game. The final scene begins in the middle of the night. Gar's belongings are sitting packed outside his bedroom. SB is awake and making a cup of tea when he sees them. As he touches the coat and stares at Gar's bedroom door, we suspect that he is more concerned about Gar's departure than he shows. When Gar can't sleep and finds SB awake too, Private urges Public to communicate with his father. Gar asks again about the memory he has of a childhood boating trip they shared, but SB doesn't remember it the same way. Overcome with frustration and emotion, Gar rushes quickly into the shop. When Madge returns from a family visit, we get a rare insight into SB's mind as he wonders whether he'll manage without Gar. One of his final lines before he leaves the stage is, "I was too old for her, Madge, eh?" Public closes with Private asking Public, or the play closes with Private asking Public, "God, boy, why do you have to leave? Why?" Gar replies, "I don't know. I don't know." The end is ambiguous and we are left unsure whether Gar goes or not. Okay, some key themes. The theme of emigration. It is interesting and important to consider the factors that are causing Gar to leave Ballybeg and go live with his Aunt Lizzie and Con in Philadelphia. Unlike Con and Lizzie, who left Donegal with nothing in our pockets, no job to go to, Gar does not have to go. Lizzie and Con left for economic reasons, but Gar is the only son of a shop owner. Gar could take over the business when his dad retires. Friel is suggesting that people leave their homes for a variety of reasons that are not always to do with the economy and employment. Gar is leaving to escape the society he lives in. His reasons may revolve around relationships and emotions. Gar's options: 1. University in Dublin, but he is not confident enough to do this. Private makes fun of him. Like hell, first Art stumped you. Taking over his dad's business, he complains to Madge that he had to work 10 minutes overtime on his last day. He is embarrassed by his dad's business. He realizes that the plans he spoke to Kate about were silly and fruitless. He talks down about his father's shop, mocking the drapery section, and inverted commas, fishy socks, and the shoebox of cotton spools. Emigration and escape for Gar. Failure surrounds him in Ballybeg. He had to return from Dublin to work in his father's shop, having failed to progress at university. Now he is paid less than Madge. He feels like he is being treated as if he were a child and is given no responsibility. Inverted commas. I'm 25 and you treat me as I were 5. 3. We later find that there is no exact true. We later find that this is not exactly true. When SB praises Gar for ordering 6 tin cans, the main failure in Gar's life is his failure to marry Kate Dugan, the girl he loves. Kate wanted to marry him, but Gar was not in position to offer her financial security. He competes with a society status of the local doctor, the man her father had picked out to be a suitable husband for his daughter. And 4. Gar's immaturity and lack of self-confidence meant that he did not stand a chance against the formidable opposition of the smooth and clever lawyer and politician Senator Dugan. Gar blames himself for the loss of the woman he loves. Inverted commas, my fault, all my fault. But there were greater forces at work against him, not least the conservative norms of class-based parochial society. I suppose another theme in that vein would be new beginnings and emotional escapism. Brian Field uses Philadelphia, Here I Come to imagine and even challenge the idea that change inherently leads to happiness. Determined to leave the small Irish town of Ballybeg, in which he has spent his entire life, Gar fixates on fulfilling the American dream by moving to Philadelphia. Planning to work at a hotel, he invests himself in the grandiose notion that relocating will bring him money and a higher social status. Moreover, his decision to move imbibes him with a sense of progress and forward momentum that is life otherwise lacks. As the play progresses through, it becomes clear that moving to Philadelphia will do little to improve Gar's life, since what he truly wants is love and happiness, not money and success. And though the play ends before Gar makes his journey to the United States, it's apparent that his life abroad will be no better than his life in Ireland. By highlighting Gar's futile attempt to run away from his problems, Friel suggests that people often romanticize the idea of new beginnings without actually addressing the emotions making them unhappy in the first place. As a result, the changes they make to their lives are abstract and largely meaningless. At the beginning of this play, Gar is nothing but excited about his journey to the United States, which he will remark on the following morning. In fact, his excitement is hardly containable, as his internal voice, Private Gar, indulges various fantasies about him living in the American dream. As Public Gar packs, Private Gar enthusiastically pretends to be the president of the hotel where he'll be working. And as the two Gars act out this conversation, Private Gar says in the voice of the president of the hotel chain where Gar will be working, inverted commas, I hope you'll be happy with us and work hard one day. Maybe you'll be president of the biggest chain of biggest hotels in the world, end inverted commas. Private Gar's repetition of the word biggest is worth mentioning, since it underscores the extent to which he has idealized his future in the United States. Indeed, He obviously is quite impressive by the mere idea of living in America, where everything seems to him larger and flashier than his relatively simple existence in Ballybeg. With this mindset, he fantasizes about the prospect of his job leading to rapid success, even though his future position as a hotel worker isn't necessarily much of a step up from his role as a shop worker in his father's store. Nonetheless, he overstates the potential for him to attain upward mobility, ultimately convincing himself that this is a good reason to move to the United States. One of the reasons Gar fixes on the idea of finding success is because he doesn't want to consider the real reasons driving him to leave Ireland, which are strictly emotional. In reality, the American dream isn't what has inspired him to go abroad. Rather, it's the fact that Kate, the love of his life, has married another man. Although Gar and Kate used to be in a relationship, she ended up marrying a rich young man instead of Gar because she wanted to please her parents. Unable to bear living in the same town as Kate, then, Gar decides to leave for America, where he hopes to forget about their relationship. Furthermore, Gar wants to leave Ballybeg because his feud fed up with his father's inability to show affection. Both of these motivating factors become apparent when Kate comes to visit him on his last night in town. As he brags about how rich he's going to become, she listens sympathetically before pointing out that his father will miss him. At the mention of his father, Gar goes into a long and impassionate rant about how he doesn't care about Ballybeg, insisting the town is miserable and means absolutely nothing to him, adding, in inverted commas, if you're not happy and content in a place, then you're not happy and content in a place. It's as simple as that. I've struck around this hole for too long. I'm telling you, it's a bloody quagmire, a black backwater, a dead end. Inverted commas. By framing Killybegs as a swamp, capable of sucking people in and holding them back in life, Gar acts as his hunger for progress is what's driving him away. In truth, there is only emotional response indicates that he's simply trying to escape heartache. By the end of this play, Gar is less sure about his decision to leave Ballybeg. This is perhaps because he knows that moving to the United States won't actually bring him happiness. After all, he's obvious that he doesn't truly care about becoming rich and successful, but simply wants to put his past behind him, something he likely won't be able to do since he'll still be the same person and will therefore still struggle with his relationship with his father and his disappointment surrounding his breakup with Kate. Nevertheless, he believes he must move forward, thinking that any kind of change will help him combat his emotions. In inverted commas, get up and keep active, Private Gar instructs him at one point. And inverted commas, the devil makes work of idle hands. It is this fear that static will lead to emotional misery that fuels Gar's determination to leave Ballybeg, and even though he seems to realise at the end of the play that he will be more difficult to outrun his feelings than he'd like to think, he doesn't let go of his plan to leave home. In turn, Friel creates a portrait of a man so unwilling to confront painful feelings that he idolizes change for the sake of change, refusing to fully accept the new horizons won't magically solve his emotional troubles. Okay, another theme, disappointment. Another theme is disappointments. There are many disappointments throughout Philadelphia Here I Come. In the relationships, Kate did not marry the man who she loved truly. She now married Dr. King, which is, in inverted commas, loveless marriage. SB lost his wife, Mary, only after 1 year of marriage. Aunt Liz and Con's marriage, loneliness, emptiness, without children in their family. Master Boy lost the woman he loved when Mary married SB. And Gar's disappointment in love. SB and Gar not communicating in their relationship. They don't communicate or express their feelings to one another. Gar feels deep disappointment at this relationship with his father. Gar failed to make any real headway when he went to Dublin to attend university. This is another reason for him to leave Killybegs. Emigration is an escape from his failures, his disappointments, and escape from people and places that remind him that these failures and disappointment. Gar asked Joe the boys, and in inverted commas, she asked you. He is disappointed that Madge had to ask the boys over for tea, for them to say goodbye to Gar. In his anger and disappointment, he calls them, in inverted commas, ignorant bloody louts. Gar is also angry and disappointed at the Canon's inability or refusal to break the ice between him and SB when in fact the Canon was in the perfect position of authority to do so. Madge doesn't know how the father and son are unable to express their feelings to one another. Disappointment that they can't communicate with each other. They communicate better with her. Both Gar and SB talk to Madge about each other. Clearly, disappointment is a major theme running throughout Philadelphia's Here I Come. Okay, a wee bit more elaboration on communication and affection. In Philadelphia, Here I Come, a play about Gar O'Donnell's decision to leave his home in Ireland for the United States, Brian Friel demonstrates the difficulty of trying to convey emotions to loved ones without open communication. A young man in his mid-20s, Gar wants to leave home largely because of his stilted relationship with his father, SB. Although they spent the majority of their time together, they're unable to truly connect. In fact, their conversations are so predictable that Gar's alter ego, a separate character called Private Gar, whom only Gar and the audience hears, can anticipate everything SB says, bemoaning his father's inability to speak meaningfully to him. This strained dynamic becomes especially upsetting to Gar as his departure from Ireland draws near, since he desperately wants his father to express his affections for him, and although it becomes clear that SB and Gar do share non-verbal affection and that SB truly is sad his son is leaving, his inability to communicate effectively gives Gar the impression that he doesn't care about their relationship. In this way, Friel indicates that although affection can take many forms, a lack of direct communication can tragically estrange people from one another. Gar views his father's inability to speak openly as the reason their relationship is so strained. Sitting at the table with SB after a day of work, he yearns for his father to say something unpredictable, since this would prove that the old man wants to converse with him. Instead, though, SB only repeats the same phrases he says at the end of each day, prompting Private Gar to launch into a monologue about how he's leaving home because he and his father can't engage in a legitimate conversation. In keeping with this, he says that he and SB would embarrass each other if either one of them were ever to say something genuine about the other, such as, in inverted commas, "You're looking tired," or "That's a bad cough you have." This suggests that both men are so unused to relationships to one another that they would be completely disarmed to discover that they think about each other. And yet, this kind of connection is precisely what Gar yearns for, as he privately declares that he might stay home if SB uttered just one honest remark instead of an idle pleasantries he uses to fill the silence. This, Private Gar says, would make him consider their entire relationship, causing him to wonder if it was wrong to assume that SB has no feelings. In turn, the audience sees just how much importance Gar places on the act of communication and how deeply his father's disinclination towards verbal engagement affects him. Interestingly enough, though, Gar only voices these thoughts to himself, letting Private Gar, whom Friel describes in his stage notes as Gar's conscious or alter ego, thoughts to himself, letting Private Gar articulate the way he truly feels. That SB can't hear Private Gar is worth noting, since it indicates that Gar is just as inept as his father when it comes to openly communicating. Rather than actually talking to SB about why he's leaving home, he privately reflects upon how badly he wants his father to reach out to him. As a result, he fails to give voice to his feelings, despite his desire to engage with SB before he leaves. Although Gar wants his father to speak openly with him, he also recognizes on a certain level that communication isn't the only way for people to relate or to show affection. Gar articulates this when he recalls a peaceful day that he and SB spent fishing together. In inverted commas, it was a great happiness, an act of bubbling joy. End of inverted commas, he thinks. Inverted commas. Although nothing was being said, just the two of us fishing on a lake on a showery day. End of inverted commas. This memory remains in Gar's mind because it was one of the few times in his life that he felt a shared sense of happiness with his father. Even though they weren't saying anything to each other, it's clear that they both occupied the same headspace in the moment, realizing their time together. This, it's easy to see, is much more emotionally rewarding than passing rote, mindless pleasantries back and forth at the end of the day in a sad imitation of a verbal connection. By spotlighting this dramatic, Friel intimates that there are multiple ways for people to engage on an emotional level, not all of which depend upon language or conversation. At the same time, though, Friel implies that knowing how to communicate effectively is a vital skill when it comes to showing affection. Although it's possible to silently share meaningful moments like that one Gar and SB had while fishing, these moments are rare, which is why verbal engagement is so important when it comes to maintaining relationships. For instance, the audience learns that SB truly does feel strongly for his son when he talks to Madge, the housekeeper, about how fond he has always been of the boy. Unfortunately, he has never articulated this to Gar himself, which is why Gar feels so estranged. However, SB isn't the only ineffective communicator, as evidenced by the fact that Gar himself literally runs out of the room at the first sign that his father might actually say something meaningful. This happens when Gar finally works up the courage to ask his father remembers a tender moment from his childhood. Because SB doesn't recall the specifics of this day, Gar shouts down and is so focused on hiding his disappointment that he fails to notice that his father slowly recollects the day, making it clear that he actually does remember. This failure to connect, in turn, illustrates how difficult it is to communicate openly after failing to do so for so long. With this, Friel stresses the importance of using frequent communication to establish a relationship foundation. Without this basis of openness, the play warms people cannot effectively connect when they want to show affection. Another theme, memory, nostalgia and the past. Throughout Philadelphia Here I Come, Brian Friel explores the way people conceive of their own memories, illustrating how they often manipulate or destroy their conceptions of the past in order to trick themselves into feeling happy. Gar recognizes this tendency amongst his peers in Ireland as he prepares to travel to the United States. Unlike his friends, he appears unwilling to shine an unrealistic positive light on his past, recognizing that neither he nor anyone else will ever be able to change what has already happened. He becomes critical of the ways in which everyone around him exalts bygone days and invests themselves in memories that exist as abstractions fixed in an inaccessible past. At the same time, though, he also romanticizes the future by hoping to escape troubling emotions by moving into United States. By mining his contradictory dynamic, then, Friel uses Philadelphia Here I Come to issue a warning not only about using change to avoid emotional hardship, but also about idolizing certain memories to ignore the true nature of one's past. Gar has already realized at the outset of the play that he'll never be able to recapture the happiness of his past. This is because the time period he most yearns to return actually doesn't belong in his past, since it took place before he was born, when his mother was still alive, because she died 3 days after giving birth to him. He never got to meet her, but he often thinks about what her life must have been like. While packing the night before his journey to the United States, he opens an old suitcase and finds a newspaper clipping of his parents' wedding announcements, causing him and his eternal self and alter ego Private Gar to reminisce about what Madge, the housekeeper, has told him about his mother. As Private Gar considers her memory, though, he suddenly cuts himself off by quoting a speech delivered by the 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke, in which Burke bemoaned the bygone peaceful days of France before the French Revolution, by repeating Burke's overtly nostalgic words about how beautiful Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, was before she was decapitated. Private Gar reminds himself that it's unproductive to fixate on what can't be changed in keeping with this. Public Gar belts out, in inverted commas, Philadelphia, here I come, clearly wanting to turn his attention to the present and the future instead of letting the memory of his late mother consume his life. Unlike Gar, the people around him are very attached to the past. This is especially apparent when his friend Ned speaks boisterously about a night he and several pals had together. Although Gar was present, Ned tells him what happened, saying that he, Tom, and another friend named Jimmy went into a set of caves to go swimming with two women. According to Ned, he and Tom decided to go for a swim while Jimmy remained with the women. Shortly therefore, he claims they saw Jimmy running away naked, yelling, "Save me, boys, save me!" while the two women chased him. After Ned finishes the story, everyone laughs and celebrates the humorous memory, but Gar privately recalls that he was also there that night, and Ned, he knows, has altered the story. In reality, they went swimming in front of girls, and then they decided to go to take Jimmy's pants off as a joke. When they approached him, Jimmy managed to fend them all off, wrestling them to the ground before they finally decided to go home. When they approached him, though, Jimmy managed to fend them all off, wrestling them to the ground before they finally decided to head home, leaving the two women in the cave. Needless to say, this story isn't quite as humorous as Ned's version, but which made the night sound wild and hilarious, when it was actually quite unremarkable and perhaps a bit pathetic, insofar as the boys behave childishly in front of the women. Gar's recognition of Ned's fabrication is important to note, since it shows that he's sensitive to the ways people refigure the past to make it sound more appealing in the moment. Like Ned, Gar's father, S.B., also exhibits a certain kind of unfounded nostalgia about the past. In a conversation with Madge, he speaks extensively about a sailor suit Gar used to wear as a young boy, fondly remembering how cute and lovely the boy used to be. And though this might not be an accurate memory, his emotional recollection is out of step with the fact that he failed, even when Gar was a boy, to foster a sense of connection between himself and his son. Nonetheless, he chooses to focus only on this tender memory, not recalling the reality of his relationship with Gar during that period. Private Gar comments on this myopic view of the past when he periodically quotes Edmund Burke's wistful speech about the days before the French Revolution. After all, Burke is right that the French Revolution was a ghastly and bloody affair, but there's no denying that the revolution changed the course of history for the better, largely putting an end to feudalism and absolute monarchy, giving rise to more egalitarian modes of governance. By irreverently referring Burke's nostalgia about Europe before the French Revolution, then, Private Gar critiques the human tendency to become overly sentimental about the past in a way that blinds people to the necessity of change. And though Friel also uses Gar's obsession with moving to the United States to caution against the pitfalls of using change as a means of emotional escape, he intimates that nostalgia is often regressive and emotionally unproductive. Another theme, the public life and private life and identity. In Philadelphia, Here I Come, Friel draws a stark distinction between a person's internal and external worlds by splitting the play's protagonist Gar into two separate characters, Private Gar and Public Gar. Each one played a different actor by a different actor. Public Gar, the playwright explains, is a Gar who everyone else in the play sees, but private Gar is the unseen man, the man within the consciousness, the alter ego, the secret thoughts, the id. In this capacity, private is more straightforward and assertive than public, indulging Gar's wildest fantasies about getting rich or becoming important. However, egging public on isn't private's only role. As one might expect from a character playing a person's id, the part of the psyche that is driven by a primal desires. Rather, private exists the ability to exercise prudence and restraint, as is the case when he urges public to stop speaking so angrily to his former lover Kate. As a result, private is more than just a devil on the public's shoulder, but a representative of public's entire internal world. Furthermore, the fact that public sometimes fails to follow private's advice is a sign that it's often difficult for people to bridge the gap between their inner feelings and their outward behaviour. In keeping with this, Friel's study of the intersection between a person's private and public lives highlights the complex and variable nature of the identity, ultimately providing that people contain multitudes. At the beginning of the play, Friel introduces Private with a stage note that frames him as the side of Gar's personality that knows no restraint. He refers to him as Gar's id, meaning that Private is the part of Gar that is instinctively and unbound by extensive concerns about how to behave. This makes sense considering that he is the private side of Gar, so he can act however he wants without having to worry about what other people think. As such, he is bold and shameless, confidently waxing poetically about how triumphant Gar's imminent journey to the United States will be. Moreover, he urges Gar to brazenly forget about people like his father, telling him he should stick his head out of the plane window the following day and spit down on the lot of them, in inverted commas. By indulging these self-aggrandizing fantasies, Private tries to get Gar to embrace what he wants for the future without paying attention to anything else. Although Private initially seems like the embodiment of Gar's unchecked desires, it's worth observing that he's actually more complicated and three-dimensional than he first appears. Friel's stage note describes Private with words that build an image of him as confident and mischievous, associating him with the alter ego, the secret thoughts. However, the playwright also defines Private as Gar's conscience. This suggests that he is the voice or force that guides Gar by telling him the best way to act, constantly gauging what is right and what is wrong. Needless to say, this tendency towards measure and evaluation contradicts with the other half of Friel's description. In fact, it also conflicts with the manner in which Private conducts himself during the first scene, when he boldly invites Gar to think himself self-aggrandizing thoughts. But this contradiction, it seems, is integral to the nature of Gar's internal voice, which encompasses an entire range of emotional and temperament. It would be easy to assume that the distinction between public and private Gar is clean and simple, since the mere fact that Friel makes a distinction between the two suggests that each side of Gar's personality must be the other's polar opposite. This in turn creates an impression that private is no one end of a spectrum while public is on the other. That private is on one end and public is on the other. But this isn't necessarily the case. For instance, Private sometimes tries to urge Gar to act with care and prudence, like when he tells him to stop telling Kate about how much he hates Ireland. Listen to public rambling on in an angry tone about how Ballybeg is a terrible place. Private realises that he's upsetting Kate and offending her, since she herself has no plans to leave Ballybeg, so he pleads with public Gar to change the subject, demonstrating that he is more socially intelligent than one would normally attribute to a person's alter ego. According to Friel's decision to separate Gar into two characters hints at his belief that people aren't always what their outward appearance suggests. To the end, the nuanced and wide-ranging nature of Gar's internal identity is a testament to the fact that people can't be reduced to just one personality, as Gar's multifaceted identity demonstrates that people often harbour entire worlds of emotion and temperament beneath their public persona. Somehow,